Alexandra Marshall, I knew there was something really off about the left-wing Guardian newspaper. I always knew there was a stench about it. Now it's admitted that its founder and first investors made money from slaves. Its editor apologises for this crime against humanity, she calls it, and the paper is trying to give money to the descendants of the slaves. But an historian hired by The Guardian says nothing it does will ever be enough. Here he is.
We're going to do our best as an organisation to engage in forms of restorative justice, but it can, by its very nature, given the scale and the horror of the crime, it will never be enough.
Well, Alexandra, nothing will ever be good enough for The Guardian today, and making good for The Guardian a couple of 100 years ago plus. Do you agree with that?
Well, The Guardian brought this on themselves quite literally by sponsoring the research that brought this about. But what I think is interesting is The Guardian is using this as quite a cynical marketing exercise. They've announced the initial release of more positions that they're going to appoint people of ethnic backgrounds to. They're running a whole sort of little campaign about it. It's really about clicks at the end of the day. But what I will say is that the politics of vengeance creates a future of violence. And this idea of blaming innocent people today for things that happened in the past is a complete nonsense. I mean, I don't see anybody looking at Rome and blaming the Italians for their tourist industry run almost entirely on Roman brutality. No one's having a chat to them. But what I think Carl Benjamin, who I was speaking to yesterday, said it best. When Britain was in charge of world power, they used their wealth and their blood to end slavery for everybody. And slavery was an endemic human trait that everyone did to itself, and the UK ended it entirely. And they've never been punished more for it. I mean, the Marxists have said, thanks for ending slavery, we're now going to persecute you for the rest of time. And this is not a healthy way to play at politics.
James, so Guardian executives today who never owned slaves are going to pay reparations to people who never were slaves either. So how does that work?
Andrew, this is the most perverse kind of virtue signalling, because the cheapest way to make yourself seem virtuous is to point out the wrongs of other people, because it doesn't cost you anything other than the ability to point. And the amazing thing about this story is that no one was asking The Guardian to apologise. Indeed, no one was accusing The Guardian of anything. They commissioned academics to go on a treasure hunt for 2 years to try to find if they had any links to slavery. And you can almost imagine the glee when they realised that they did, because now they had a pretext to demonstrate how enlightened they were, apologising not for themselves but for the sins of other people. It's a terrible thing to do, but worse than that, it establishes the principle of hereditary sin, where now, if we accept this sort of garbage, every single one of us has to apologise for things that have happened in our family tree, and who doesn't have that? And so who can stand in public office or indeed in any corporate area if we're going to judge everybody by the sins of their forebears? It's not only unfair, but it's just ridiculous.
Well, essentially it's racist. And as Shakespeare said, who will escape whipping when you get to that?
Indeed.
James McPherson, Alexandra Marshall, thank you both for coming here. Alexandra, it's your first time on the show. Really appreciate it. Hope we'll see you again.